And our time is 11:04 and a half. We're starting a half a minute early, Sheriff. Can you believe that?
I can't believe we're actually starting early.
I know, right? We always run a little longer, so I think the earlier we start, the longer we talk, right?
Well, I think the earlier I get here, the more often you have cake.
And earlier, yeah, he got here earlier today. I sent him a text that there was cake over here, and to feel free to bring a pot of coffee. And he didn't. He did not let me down. and Helen Long, she was up at 4 o'clock this morning baking a cake. And you know what she told me?
What?
This is the truth. She says, "Now you give that young one, talk about Chief Jacobs, a
Right.
big piece of cake, but only give Sheriff Palmer a little tiny sliver."
Well, that's probably pretty good advice, so just a little bit.
She wanted to make sure I picked on you a little bit.
Hey, I went to the doctor this week and had blood work done a couple of weeks ago. Got the results this week. Everything was good. It was in normal ranges. My A1C's down, and
Awesome.
blood pressure was down. Everything was down in good place, and so ever since then, I've eat crazy.
That's great. Yes,
Yeah.
And people don't understand my weight gain situation, but when they see
Right.
all the cakes and the cookies and stuff that are here at the studio, it's pretty easy to understand.
Well, we don't want to disappoint people, right?
Exactly.
When they bring us desserts and cakes and cookies and all that, we don't want to disappoint them, so we have to eat what they bring us.
Someone the other day told me I'm starting to look like a whale, and I took that as a compliment because that means I have a swimmer's build.
There you go.
I have a swimmer's
Yeah,
build.
yeah.
All right. Well, good morning, Sheriff. We appreciate your taking the time to be with us this morning, and we have you've had a very busy week, and sadly
I
the
have.
week started on a very tragic note, and let's talk about that. There was a murder in Andrews, and we just want to send our thoughts and prayers out to the families involved and the friends involved in that situation, and a very tragic situation, a situation that should have never happened.
Right.
So a lot of folks, we shared this on our Facebook page as a press release, but a lot of folks that are listening to the radio don't have access to Facebook, so let's just kind of recap that. We don't want to bring up a lot of old wounds, but we do want to inform our public of what's going on.
Yeah, we had a notification there Sunday evening of a dispute there in Andrews, and it resulted in one person shooting another one, and we responded to the scene to find a female there that had been wounded, then succumbed to her injuries and died there on the scene. The description was given out of the person who had done it, and one of our deputies were in the area of Murphy there about the casino, Snap-on Tools area, and saw a vehicle that matched the description of what to be on the lookout for, and he turned and got behind the vehicle and ran the tag number on that vehicle and found it to be the vehicle that we were looking for. He followed it a ways, waiting on other deputies to arrive and Murphy Police Department to assist on a traffic stop. And when we got down near the McDonald's intersection, he conducted a traffic stop there, and the subject stopped in the middle of the highway and surrendered peacefully to law enforcement at that point. And we were glad to hear of that he did surrender peacefully. We was expecting maybe some bad things to happen there at that traffic stop, but luckily it didn't. The Lord was looking out for us and looking out for everybody involved, and we were able to take him into custody without incident.
Let's see, the vehicle that he was driving, was that his vehicle? Did he take that?
No, that was a vehicle that he had purchased from someone else, and subsequently in that vehicle, we conducted a search warrant for that vehicle and did not find the weapon in the vehicle, but got some information on that, and we're following those leads up. But we did find approximately 3 ounces of methamphetamine in the vehicle. So I think it was 89 point something grams of methamphetamine in the vehicle also. So he'll be charged with those charges also, probably when it comes time for indictment. But a lot of people ask the question, why second-degree murder and not first-degree on the charge? And so I just want to clarify that just a little bit. One is when we have a major incident like that happen, first thing that we do is we consult with the district attorney's office about what we have and the evidence we have and what their recommendations are as far as charging and things of that nature. First degree murder, you have to prove that there was meditation, that they thought about it ahead of time, they thought about it beforehand, they devised a plan, and they carried that plan out to take someone's life. Second degree murder is what they call a crime of passion murder. It's more of a heat in the moment type of thing. And so the district attorney felt with the evidence that we had there at the time that was the appropriate charge for the time. So that's what we charged him with. But so people understand this is as the interviews go and as we collect evidence and we talk with people, those charges can change. They can either be upgraded or they can be downgraded depending on what the district attorney feels like needs to be done with that. And when it comes time to indict in a grand jury, they may indict on a completely different charge. So we arrest based on what information we have in front of us at the time.
All right. And I noticed on the Cherokee County Detention Center website, it originally listed second-degree murder, and then a couple of days later, it just listed murder.
Right.
What is the reason for that change?
There's not really a reason. Those things that they put in the detention center is just based on the detention officer and what they put in to that system. It depends on the way the magistrate wrote the orders up and those type of things. So they put pretty much when the magistrate puts a confinement order, they go in front of the judge and the judge does an arraignment or type of thing. They'll basically type in whatever those orders say when they come back. So when people see those things on the detention center website, those are things that we put in as an office as just putting information out there. Those things that's listed on the internet is not an official transcript, or it's not anything official from the court system. It's just the information that we put out there to the public.
Is it possible for us to share with the public if there was a motive involved in this?
Like I say, it's still an ongoing investigation, so I don't want to get in too much detail about evidence and those type of things. But at this point, all we can really put out there right now is there was some type of argument that happened. A weapon was produced by the suspect, and subsequently the person was fatally injured. And so we do know it stemmed from an argument.
All right. One thing I want to address here on Facebook is because we get a lot of comments about this, and people are curious and they want to say, well, who was it? And a lot of times we work closely with your office, and we don't want to release information, especially something so tragic as this, until family has been notified. And we want to make sure people on Facebook understand that when we don't release a name and we say we'll release more later, why that is.
Right.
And sadly, there have been situations where families have found out that they have lost a loved one on Facebook before they got proper notification.
It has happened. It has happened several times.
What does that mean for a family?
It's devastating, when they find out. And as a matter of fact, on several situations that we've had, we've shown up at a residence to do a death notification, and we usually take clergy with us. We take our law enforcement clergy. We take people from the Victims Advocate Unit and those type of things and help with the death notification. So we have counselors and people that are available to help the families when we give those notifications. But a lot of times when people find out on Facebook or somebody calls them and tells them what happened or asks them questions about what happened before we get there, it leaves the family a lot of time in a panic and wondering what's going on and wanting answers for things and nobody there to give them an answer. And so, our thing is, and what we try to stress a lot is to people out there, is that I know people try to put things out as fast as they can on Facebook and get information out there, but sometimes that's not the best thing to do. And at least give us a little while to notify families and things when we have tragedies. And it's not just when you have a murder happen, but it can also be a car wreck. It could be a pedestrian struck or anything like that. When people are taking pictures on scene of vehicles involved in an accident and taking pictures on scene of a person who is injured and putting those things on Facebook, it really is devastating to the family a lot of times when they see those things.
Absolutely. And as a radio station and a news outlet, we want to be as respectful as we can. We want to share that information with people to let people know that the situation, a lot of times, is just to divert traffic away from the situation, or to let people know why there's a huge police presence.
Right.
And we'll get all the details a little bit later and share that. But as a radio station, we want to be respectful about that.
Right. Well, one thing, too, is like last weekend when all this happened, when the suspect, when we stopped him there at McDonald's intersection, we literally had the entire 4-lane shut down because we do have a history with this person. We do know of drug history. We do know we've charged him before with drugs. We've charged him before with some other violent crimes. We've known he's been charged out of state with violent crimes. So we knew kind of a history about this person. And so we shut the entire 4-lane down because we didn't know what to expect from him. We didn't know whether he was going to surrender peacefully or whether he was going to come out of the car shooting at police or what was going to happen. So So we had the entire 4-lane shut down. So when we do those things, typically I typically send it to WKRK first to some type of immediate release, just so you can get those things out there on Facebook, let people, like you say, avoid the area or know what's going on. But if you remember, the original release was just, we've apprehended a suspect. We're at this location. We'll give you more information later. Because what a lot of public don't understand, and we see this from time to time, is for that particular situation, for example, when we've got the 4-lane shut down and we're trying to deal with the situation, then we have people want to drive by and see what's happening. Right. They want to come and look, and they want to come take pictures, and they want to come do these things. But a lot of times people don't realize they're putting themselves in danger.
It's a dangerous situation,
and not only
a hindrance to you as well.
It could be, and not only are we having to deal with the person, but now we're having to deal with onlookers and deal with traffic and deal with these things. And, more of on a lighter note kind of thing, but to drive the point home, last Sunday morning, they had a driving school at the Andrews Airport, and it was for basic law enforcement training, and they were training candidates on there how to do high-speed pursuits and driving courses and those type of things. And part of that training is you have to run blue lights, and you have to run sirens, and you have to run these things to get the feel of that type of thing for people that's never done it before. But people were all over Facebook talking about what's going on at the airport. There's police presence over there, and they're chasing somebody around the airport, and and before you know it, there were a gathering of onlookers coming to the airport to see what's happening. They was interrupting the class, asking instructors what was going on,
right.
All these type of things. And so a lot of people don't realize that they could potentially be putting themselves in danger by coming to things they see and read on Facebook.
And a lot of people were putting those two situations together as the same event. And it was not, it was two separate events.
Right.
One was a training and one was a tragic situation. So, and I read that on Facebook, a lot of all this misinformation out there. And I was reading a story yesterday that false news that's posted on Facebook, that spreads about 6 times faster than real news.
It does.
That was amazing to me. And I can spot those fake headlines a mile away, but a lot of people, they'll see the dramatic headline and just share that with their friends, and it's just misinformation.
Right. And the thing about it is, when you talk about how that spreads so quickly, we try to put positive stories out there on our page too, along with the news that's happening in the area. But you can put something tragic or put something out there that is not really the best news in the world, and you'll see how it gets many shares. It reaches thousands of people. There are a lot of emojis that's put on that. People liking or hearts or frowny faces or whatever they want to put on it. But you put a positive story out there, and you talk about things that somebody did, an officer did a good job, or those type of things, and they don't get near the shares or don't get near the stuff.
It's true. Sadly, it's the truth
that all the other horrible things kind of get. So, and it's unfortunately it's one of these things to where with social media, you can put a totally false, fake story out there and slander someone's name, and it gets spread like wildfire all over the Facebook. But the truth and the true part of something, people don't want to share it and don't want to talk about it.
And that's what's happened with the the national newscasts have degraded quite a bit from the time we were growing up when they actually reported the news, because the networks saw that the shock and awe sold more commercials. They could charge higher rates for commercials, and we have papers like the National Enquirer that sell, but a lot of that stuff's just not true. So a lot of our newscasts from a national standpoint have become so sensationalized.
Right.
It has really put a...
Well, the other thing, too, when you think about it, when we were growing up and news was produced, stories were verified, sources were checked out, the backstories was checked into and made sure that the news they were putting out was true and credible news. And it seems like as... back in the day, you had 2 or 3 news outlets, and along with your newspapers and radio that did that. But now there's so many news sources, and there's so many outlets, along with social media and the news business, and mom and pop bloggers out there starting their own kind of news blogs and those type of things, that everyone's in competition to be the first one to get the news out. And so we've kind of lost that thing of checking resources and checking your sources of your story and verifying that it's true and verifying that someone doesn't have an alternative agenda, kind of thing. And we've kind of lost all of that in reporting, and it's kind of went more toward, like you say, the sensationalism and who can get up there first and who can get the most likes or who can get the most commercial time out of it.
It seems nowadays that we have two agendas. Some networks are pushing the liberal agenda, some are pushing the conservative agenda, but it's all slightly, if not greatly biased. And
I tell my wife this, and it's really true. I said, when I watch the national news, I really watch the one depending on what kind of mood I'm in, because I can tell you before I ever turn the channel on what they're going to be saying and what kind of stories they're going to be reporting, depending on what station you turn on. And so if I feel one way, I'll watch one station. If I feel another way, I can watch another station and get whatever news I want to get.
Right. That's true.
And unfortunately, it's true. That's what happens.
All right. This past Saturday, you were at I forget the name of it, but it's
Murphy Bible Church.
At Murphy Bible, the Citizens Group. I'm not sure what they're called. I think they came up with a name, something about it's an anti-drug organization. Yeah. And a lot of people had a lot of questions for you, and you did a great job answering those questions. You. And there's another meeting coming up on the 1st of the month. No, let's see, it's the 1st of the month.
I think it's not tomorrow, but next Saturday.
Yeah, it was 2 weeks from the last meeting. So that's coming up. And someone's also asking about the St. Patrick's Day Drug Coalition as well. But can you recap some of the things that were discussed Saturday at the meeting at Murphy Bible Church?
Yeah, I mean, and one of the things, and it's kind of like when I go to Sunday school class, I don't like to talk in Sunday school because I have a tendency to the preacher kick in and take over the class, And so when you go to these meetings, I know people ask a lot of questions, but I feel bad because I feel like I take over the meeting, and I feel like that I talk a little bit too much sometimes on topics and areas. But when people are asking the questions, you have to answer what they ask you. But the fact of the matter is that we are in a place now in Cherokee County and nationwide, really, but in Cherokee County, we're in a place where people are seeking answers to the problems that we have. And this is one of the groups that's put together to try to have a roundtable discussion about what's happening out there and what can we do as a community to try to help the drug situation and the drug problems that we're seeing, to help with homelessness and all the different things that are going on in our area. And just this morning, while Chief Jacobs was doing his radio program this morning, I was meeting with the Assistant Chief, Dustin Smith, and a group of High on Hope from High on Hope Ministry from Ohio that we're trying to get to come to Western North Carolina, and we're starting a High on Hope Western North Carolina to help do some ministry here and do some things here to kind of work in conjunction with some of these groups that are going on. So basically what we're looking at is how to approach it from a community perspective. What can we do as business owners? What can we do as community people? What can we do as neighborhoods? What can we do to try to help the drug situation that's in our area? One thing that I do want to say, though, and I want to make sure that people understand this, is that no one has a delusion that we are going to completely rid our area of drugs and we're not going to have drugs and drugs is not going to be an issue. We know that is always going to be an issue. As long as people want drugs, as long as people are seeking drugs, there's going to be drugs and there's going to be drugs around. But what can we do to help curb it? What can we do to help people who are addicted? What can we do to help them get in recovery and get help and those type of things? And so those are all areas that we're looking at on trying to come up with a community perspective as far as dealing with drug situation. I've said before, and I said it in the meeting Saturday, and I'll say it again. I get beat up for this a lot for saying this, but it is true. That when we think about the addictive end of drugs and we think on what drugs has done to our community and what drugs have done to our nation, we can't just simply say it's a law enforcement problem, let law enforcement deal with it. We will never arrest our way out of this problem. No. We will never arrest enough people. We will never put enough people in jail. We'll never send enough people to prison to combat this problem. So we have to look at it as a community problem. We have to look at it as a community issue, and how does community and law enforcement partner together? There is a law enforcement component. There is a component where people need to be arrested. There is a component where people need to go to jail. There is a problem where, or a component to where law enforcement does their job and the judicial system does their job and probation parole does their job. There's a whole law enforcement component to that. But we have to look from the prevention side of it. We have to look for education side of it. We have to look for rehabilitation. We have to look for communities as far as business owners and community members as to what they can do to take their neighborhoods back and help those that that may be addicted in their families or may be addicted in their neighborhoods, so they can do a neighborhood community approach to some things. And let us all work together on this problem. And so many times we have, and one of the things I said in the meeting Saturday is all of us have a piece to the puzzle, but we never complete the puzzle if we don't put all the pieces together. If we don't put them where they belong and fasten them together, then we just have a bunch of loose pieces out there doing what loose pieces do. And so that's why we're meeting with these groups and meeting with High on Hope and meeting with the Drug Free Coalition from Jenny Irwin's group at school. And we're going to try to schedule a meeting here in a week or two to get all these different groups together, talk about what we're all doing in our individual groups and how these groups can come together for a common goal, and work that in conjunction with our day youth center and the other things that we've got started here in Cherokee County. So I'm real excited about the future. I'm real excited about some of the things I've been hearing and what I've been hearing from our community. And I think we can really make a positive change and a positive difference.
It's encouraging for me to see all these people and all these groups come together and want to help. And I know we talk about drugs a lot here on the radio station. I hope nobody thinks of WKRK as the drug station. But we are focused on, we want to see a positive outcome from this situation, and because it has gotten out of hand.
Right.
And someone was asking too, they were talking about Andrews, a lot of people walking around town. There's a lot of drug deals done right there in broad daylight. And you can see people just walking around tweaking or whatever that's called when they're high.
Right.
And someone was asking about you can be arrested for public intoxication. Does that also apply for those who are walking around on drugs?
Not necessarily, because some of the public intoxication laws and things that are out there on the books specifically says intoxicated on alcohol. And so it specifically is statutes for alcoholics and for alcohol. And so one of the things we discussed this morning was some of the rules and regulations that are in our law books and that the judicial system has to follow and those type of things. I think our guidelines that we face now, Assistant Chief Smith spoke of this morning. I think that some of the guidelines that our court system uses were guidelines that were set back in the 70s. And so we have to be thinking about, as part of this solution to the problems that are out there, is lobbying legislation and petitioning our senators and our congressmen about introducing legislation to update some of these laws and change some of these things that are on the books to where we can deal with some of the issues and some of the problems that are out there. For example, I know years ago, if someone was, say you saw them, they just shot up with drugs and or snorted some drugs or whatever in their system, and you had evidence of that, we could charge a possession charge that they had to possess it to use it. And the court system don't let us charge that anymore, saying we can't charge them with possession because we have no evidence of possession. And so just little things like that kind of keeps our hands tied a lot of times. And so we still have the paraphernalia charges, but the courts have updated that and said if they tell you they have paraphernalia, you can't just charge that by itself if they disclose it and tell you. So, they've really made it difficult for us a lot of times on charging things and cleaning streets up. But one of the things I do want to say about this too is there are times that you see things happen out there, and I see things happen, and law enforcement sees things happen that we know what's happening. But because you know it doesn't necessarily mean you can prove it in court. It doesn't necessarily mean that you can prove it in front of 12 people in court. And so, if you see someone meeting on the street and they shake hands and hug, and one of them walks by and got their hand in their pocket, sticks something in their pocket, common sense tells you they probably just did a drug deal, right? But can I lay my hand on the Bible and swear to a judge and to 12 jurors that they traded drugs and one bought drugs from another one? That's a different situation than knowing what happened.
And you can't just walk up to the person and ask to see what's in their pocket.
Well, sometimes you can, depending on what you saw, depending on things. If you can articulate that I saw A, B, and C, and that constitutes what I believe is a drug deal, as a law enforcement officer, we can stop them, we can question them, we can potentially search them, whatever it may be. But my point of that is a lot of times people from the public see things happen, like two cars meet, or they see two people talk on the street, or those type of things, and they automatically say, well, I saw a drug deal. And you could have very well saw a drug deal, but did you actually see money being exchanged? Did you see one person handing somebody something else and them handing them money back? And if you want to look from a defense attorney point of view on this, one of the things that a defense attorney would argue is, how do you know they didn't just buy something off of eBay, and they sold them an ashtray? He gave them an ashtray and he gave them $2 for his ashtray,
Right.
And so just because you saw an exchange may not necessarily be enough to prove in court that they just exchanged drugs. And so I know it's frustrating for public. It's frustrating for us. It's frustrating, when these things happen. But we have to play by the rules. We have to play by the law. Drug dealers don't.
Right.
We have to play by guidelines. We have to play by what the law says we can do and can't do. They have no rules. And so we have to address all those things as we see that. But one of the things about these meetings that we're doing is trying to address some of these issues. For example, if you see those folks do that exchange and we investigate it, and we find out they did just use drugs or sell drugs or whatever, and we arrest them, and they get either an unsecured bond set or a low bond set, and they get out of jail, have we solved anything? And the answer to that would be probably no, because they're going to be right back doing the same thing they were doing before we arrested them. So we're looking at these alternatives of saying, okay, we've arrested them, we've got them in jail, they're fixing to make bond. So let's have someone from High on Hope talk to them, and let's have someone from the community perspective talk to them and see if we can offer some counseling, some help, see if they would be willing to go into rehab, see if we have some alternative solutions to this, to where they're not going right back on the street, but they may be getting some help in a different avenue that they've never been offered before. And we know that not everyone's going to take us up on that. Not everyone's going to do it. But hopefully some will, or hopefully we can plant some seeds out there that they may not do it today, but 2 weeks down the road they'll do it. So we're just trying to look for alternative methods and some alternative things to help law enforcement during that process.
I know a big part of the solution is just, for the future is early education and preventing this from becoming a problem with our younger generation.
Right.
So I'm looking forward to seeing some of that come into our schools. I'm sure it's already there now,
It is.
but it's just to see that growing. And
I go probably, I don't know, several times a semester to talk to the schools, and most of the time it's on invitation, and they ask me to come speak to classes and do some character ed things and drug awareness and those type of things. So that's mostly in the middle school settings is where we typically can do most of that stuff. But we are currently, Jenny Irwin, like I say, with the Drug Coalition, does a lot of drug education within the schools, and we assist her with some of that stuff and educating kids and doing those things. But it's one of those things, like I've said before, that the school has a curriculum. They have core teachings they have to do. They have to do these things. And so sometimes it's hard for the school system to dedicate a certain amount of time every single day or every single week out of their school day to do education and training. So we try to get in there where we can, and we try to get in there through the Drug Coalition programs and try to help our students out through education.
another area is supply and demand. If part of that early education is to decrease the demand for these drugs, then the supply may eventually diminish quite a bit. So, but dealing with the folks that are already addicted to drugs, how can we control that demand?
Well, one of the things that we have been doing, and we have been more and more successful, and as the years go by, we're getting more and more successful at it, is taking off the bigger quantities of drugs and trying to cut off some of the suppliers that's putting that stuff on the street. So we're trying to cut off the flow of that. But what happens is when you get that flow cut off, that's where you start seeing people that going through detoxing, and they're trying to, they've not had some in a day or two, so their head's clearing up a little bit, so they're coming wanting help at that point. So just even cutting the flow off and cutting that off sometimes helps people get a clear enough mind to say, I want to get some help. I want to go to detox. I'm going through DTs right now, and I'm shaking, and I need some medical attention. And you can get them into the hospitals and get them to a place where you can at least have a conversation with them.
Right.
And so when we can get them to that place where we can have a conversation with them, and we can get them to a location where they can get some help, then that rehabilitation is they get where they don't want it, and then you can cut that demand off from that end of it. And it's a multifaceted thing. It's not a simple solution. It's not something very easy to do, because if it was, people all over the United States would be doing it. But all over the United States, we continue to have a drug problem. So we're just trying to look to help those who will get the help and who will seek the help.
Part of the problem when people are coming off of drugs and they know they don't want to be in that lifestyle anymore, they want to clean up their lives, but a lot of them keep hanging out with the same people, and that's a bad thing. If you're hanging out with your old drug buddies, you're going to likely get back involved with.
Well, one of the things we talked about this morning with this High on Hope ministry, and like I say, they're out of Ohio and West Virginia, and they have a huge epidemic up there. People think we have a drug problem here. We don't have anything here compared to what they have up there. They're experiencing, anywhere from 3 to 5 overdoses a day in their communities, and so what's happening up there, we're looking at their programs they're doing there and trying to modify that to help down here. But one of the things they're doing up there is they have kind of a rapid response team, and then when people say, I want help, or they say, I want to get clean, or I'm tired of this life, then it's got a number you can call, and someone from High on Hope Ministries responds, and they do the counseling, and they do those things right there at that time. And then if they're willing to go to rehab or go somewhere, they'll drive them wherever, whether it's Florida or whether it's Alabama or South Carolina or wherever it may be that they can find a place to them. They'll actually transport people to these facilities. And so I think that's one of the things that we need here, because I hear all the time of people saying, I want clean, I want help. And by the time we call around and get them a place for them, it may be next week before they can get in, or it may be 3 or 4 days before they can get in. Well, their mindset may change in 3 or 4 days. And so one good thing about the High on Hope Ministries is they get them immediate help right then when they ask for it. And I think that's one of the components that we've been missing, is try to get them somewhere. And one of the things they always try to do is try to get them out of town somewhere.
That's good.
So that they're not continuing to be around the same friends and people that's got them into this problem, but they're somewhere else where they can get the help they need. And so, like I say, I'm real excited about this. I'm really excited about what they have to offer. And hopefully we can get this off the ground and get it going on the ministry aspect of it before too long.
Do we need stricter punishment for folks who manufacture meth, things like that?
Well, let me ask you this. Is it not a death penalty for first-degree murder? And can you get any stricter than that?
Right.
We still have murders.
Yes.
And I'm not saying it would be a bad thing, and I'm not saying we shouldn't, because I'm all for people who's profiting, who's ruining lives, and making it harder on them, for stiffer penalties and spending more time in prison and fines and those type of things. But again, I think it's a component, but I don't think it's necessarily the solution itself. I think it's a component of the solution. And anything that we can do to make penalties stiffer and make things harder on people, I think it will certainly help the situation, but I suspect it wouldn't stop it.
One of the eye-opening situations at the Murphy Bible Church, the meeting that we had, was between you and Chief Jacobs as well. Chief Jacobs had brought paperwork, this week's court docket, and a stack of paper.
Right.
And I think it helped people realize how backed up our court system is.
Right.
Can you talk about that for a bit?
Well, on most courts, if it's another court where we have drug charges and larcenies and those type of things, assaults and those type of things, most courts, we have them most weeks 2 or 3 times a week. About every day, there's probably 100 plus on every court day, 100 plus people. Then when you have domestic court, family relations court, those type of things, you're looking at 50 to 100 people on those courts per day. When you're looking at traffic court and things that's going on in traffic, you're probably looking at 300 or more per day that's on those court dockets. When you're looking at Superior Court, they try to schedule the top 10 cases to go to trial for the week of Superior Court week, but you're probably looking at 50 to 100 people per court session on that one. So when you look at all these hundreds of court cases that's being held every week in Cherokee County, sometimes it's hard for the district attorney's office to get to everything on there. And if you have, say, 400 people this week that's having court hearings, if all 400 of them, or even half of them, 200 of them say, I want a trial, there's no way of doing 200 trials during the week. So the district attorney's office has to weed through all those things and figure out what's the most important things, what do we need to proceed with, what do we want to dismiss, What do we want to reduce? All those type of things. And so, not putting blame on the district attorney's office or blame on the court system, but the fact is they're just overwhelmed. Everybody's overwhelmed.
You've said it before, and I think it's worth repeating, that when the court system was originally designed, it was not designed for today's
Right.
caseload.
Right. It was, and it was designed, 200 years ago when things were being formulated. You had very few people that was taken to court, and you had very few people that's charged with things in a court setting, and you had very few law enforcement agencies that did that. But now you've got literally hundreds of law enforcement agencies that are putting cases into the court system, and so it's just overwhelming the system.
Even the point of like 200 years ago, there was no Department of Social Services, so those cases and traffic court didn't probably exist back then.
Right.
And that takes up a lot of time.
Yeah, you had basically you had constables and you had sheriffs and you had a couple of federal things that was developed early on, but law enforcement was very minimal, and government was not big government then. It was a very small government, and that did the necessities. But now we have a huge government. We have a huge government that runs our nation, and we're putting all these things into the system, and we're just bombarding the system with it.
All right, Sheriff, I see we're running out of time. Anything else you wanted to add before we closed out today?
No, I just want to tell everyone out there to be safe. It looks like we've got some weather coming in this weekend again, and I was telling Tim earlier that I've watched 5 different weather forecasts today, and they've all said something different. So we don't know if it's going to rain, snow, be sunny this weekend, be 50 or 30, or we really don't know. So just be careful out there this weekend.
All we do know is there will be some kind of weather.
Some kind.
Yeah, so brace for it, whatever we have, even if it's sunshine. Brace for sunshine. All right. Well, Sheriff, thank you very much. We appreciate you taking time with us on Fridays and throughout the week as well, and we appreciate all the service that you do for our community. Stay tuned. We have Pastor Odd Brown coming up next with the Little Brasstown Baptist Church right here on WKRK in Murphy, North Carolina. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks for watching on Facebook Live and for listening on WKRK Radio. We'll be back with more in just a bit, right here on WKRK in Murphy, North Carolina.